Welcome back to another excellent edition of Elevate Your Grind. We are live. I am happy to be here. We are late this week. We started this week on a Wednesday as opposed to a Tuesday, but the schedule is going to be a little kludgy with the holidays coming up. We've got some date changes next week. We're going to be live on Tuesday and Wednesday. I think the following week it's going to be Wednesday and Thursday again. And we might have 3 episodes for you, but we've got some amazing guests coming up through the end of the year. And we're already booking through January and February. I'm really excited for some of the folks that we're bringing to you. I'm actually really excited for today's guest. If you pay attention to any of the past shows, you already know who that is. But if you don't, I'm punishing you and you're going to have to wait to find out. Okay. This week on YouTube, we dropped some awesome interviews. We have Lewis and Cree from Akerna. We've got Steve Ernest from Sharp Capital Advisors, a good friend of mine. Check those out at youtube.com/elevate your grind. Of course, next week, if you want to check us out, we'll be live tomorrow again at 6:30 p.m. with Sarah Stewart of the Hospitality Group. Really excited to talk to her about consumption lounges and just how you integrate cannabis into events and everything else as a whole. When something like smoking is not really allowed anywhere. And when I say smoking, not cannabis smoke, just smoke in general, right? So, really interested to talk to her about the future of cannabis consumption in public places and public events and what that's going to look like well into the future. Beyond that, next week, we're going to be live on Tuesday and Wednesday at 6:30 p.m., facebook.com/Canna Business Group. And of course, if you want to see any of the amazing panels we have coming up, those are going to be at joinclab.com. Finally, yours truly will be moderating 2 panels at the upcoming Emerge conference on December 15th and 16th. I will be hosting a panel on cannabis beverages as well as edibles, so alternate consumption methods for cannabis, and it's going to have very much a wellness spin to it. So if you're interested in that, go check out the Emerge virtual conference. That's going to be on December 15th and 16th. Really excited to be a part of that. My friend Charles Warner at Cannabis and Tech Today, they always put on a great event. We'll probably have Charles on before the event to give you a little bit more information about that. So typically I'd go through all the announcements, I go through the guests and everything else, but I'm really excited for today's guest. As before the show started and we had a little back and forth, she was telling me she's coming up on her 11th year in the cannabis industry. Not too many people can say that, at least not consecutively and at least not legally, but she absolutely can. She's probably one of the most well-known people in the cannabis industry. I was going to say one of the most well-known women, but no, she's not. She's probably one of the most well-known people in the cannabis industry. Been listed top women in cannabis, top women executive, and everything else. But honestly, all those accolades would probably still apply if we took the word women out of it. She's definitely one of the top tech CEOs in the cannabis industry for sure. So without any further ado, we had her colleague on back in July, right before my birthday. If you remember that, that was a great episode. Nina promised us next time Akerna joined the show that this guest today would be our guest. So please welcome the co-founder and CEO of MJ Freeway and the current chairman and CEO of Akerna, Jessica Billingsley. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, please, the pleasure is all mine. I appreciate you taking the time to slum it on a show such as ours with such an impressive resume. You belong much more so on CNBC and Bloomberg and all those shows, which I'm sure you've been on, but you decided to take your time and speak with us here today. So thank you for that.
Oh, we love your show.
Well, Jessica, so you've been in the industry for over a decade now. Not too many people can say that. It's interesting. I wanted to go back to the beginning and understand what brought you into this space. So I do know that you have a technology background. One of the cool things I saw is you actually got a scholarship at age 16, which is incredible. But I read that you were actually an investor in this space, and companies that you were looking at were tasking you with finding software technology to run their businesses, and you couldn't find any. And that was really the start of MJ Freeway. Did I get that right? Can you kind of give us that backstory there?
That's exactly right. So, almost a dozen years ago now, almost 12 years ago, I guess in March, I invested in one of the very first licensed operators here in Colorado. And as the investor owner that had a technology company, they asked me to choose the software to run the business. And I couldn't find anything that I could adapt to meet both the compliance needs, but also the tracking needs of cannabis. And that's where MJ Freeway was born, and we invented the concept of seed to sale tracking.
That's awesome. I mean, there's no better way to get something started than filling a real need. So, what was the company that you had before you founded MJ Freeway? So, I come from the IT space, and on my LinkedIn, there are going to be a bunch of us IT nerds watching this. I come from the reseller community, right? So, we were a very big Microsoft, IBM storage partner. So, we would resell technologies, but we also had a bench of engineers. So, we were a professional services organization on knowing that IT space. What space did you play in? Did you come from the ERP world? Did you come from an applications world? Was it a services world? I'm just curious to know. I might be the only one being the nerd in this conversation, but hopefully everybody else cares as well.
I've never been asked this one in all my years of cannabis interviews, so this is a first. I love it. The
Awesome.
company I had was an IT services business, so essentially providing outsourced IT services to small businesses. We did that in multiple states across the country, and also we're Microsoft and hardware reseller as well.
Very cool. So yeah, so you probably are familiar with the Office 365 and Azure worlds where I came from. It's funny. You know, it, I had a little bit of a similar situation. Clearly, I went in a different path sitting here interviewing you. But when I first joined the cannabis industry, I remember thinking that it was weird that you didn't see the Microsofts and the Oracles and the SAPs of this world. And I was always curious to know, and I'd love to hear your opinion. I know I think I know what the opinion is, but I think we're kind of both blessed and cursed in this industry that a lot of the bigger companies did not come in and try to take over and pigeonhole their software and adjust it to cannabis. That someone like you who had the experience outside of cannabis was able to create something from the ground up specifically for this industry that didn't exist, that it really is truly tailored to this industry instead of something that had existed already, that they bolted some pieces on and then all of a sudden it was a cannabis solution. Do you think that federal legality, keeping the Microsofts and the SAPs and Sages out of this space for the most part, A, gave you the advantage, and B, gave our industry an advantage to have something that truly catered just to us?
It's obvious that you have a tech background here from the stream of these questions. Our investor, Roger McNamee, who led our Series B private financing round for MJ Freeway, who he co-founded both Elevation Partners and Silver Lake Partners and was an early investor in Facebook. He would say that we are the last true ground up enterprise SaaS build that will happen in it that was able to be born as a result of this federal state conflict, as you note, that the big players weren't willing to enter the industry in any meaningful way. And I will tell you that 5-6 years ago, this was what kept me up at night. If we see federal legalization overnight, what happens to our business? There's no longer a barrier to these large ERP companies. And are we big enough to matter to them yet? Are we big enough to be an acquisition target or to be of interest as a partner? And for us, it's been in some ways a blessing in disguise, and also, to your point, I think a silver lining to the industry in terms of the offering that we have today. We're now integrated to Sage Intacct, NetSuite, and SAP, and so we provide that critical system of record, infrastructure compliance bus, and we're integrated to the large ERPs, and our enterprise clients can use that back end for their enterprise class financials, accounting, and tax planning, while still having all of the supply chain tracking, data reporting, and compliance that we have built specific to the industry. And it's far less expensive than if they were to try to take one of those ERPs and build them specifically for the industry. So it's really been a blessing for us. And just to note where those companies sit still, NetSuite will not currently sell into the United States. So although we're integrated with them, we're only able to sell that solution in Canada and Latin America, whereas we are able to offer Sage Intacct integration and SAP integration here in the US.
It's awesome though to see you pulling those companies into that space or into this space though, because they were maybe it gives them a degree of separation so they feel more comfortable, but they weren't looking at this space before. I remember when I first got involved, the first thing I did was start hitting up all my contacts at Microsoft. And I'm like, the amount of white space for you guys in cannabis is absolutely ridiculous. And I was having a hard time getting any callbacks, right? And I didn't realize it at first. I remember, somebody else was looking for an ERP, and I'm like, oh, I know a great ERP company that does custom solutions. And I have a friend who worked there. I called her. She's so excited. She calls her boss and sends me an email back. I don't agree with it, but we can't work with cannabis companies, right? And it was
Hmm.
just shocking to me. Like for 2 seconds, and I wish I still have my business cards here. I started seeing the MJ Freeways of the world come up, and the Spring Bigs of the world come up, and all these technology companies. And I go, well, maybe I should just be a reseller for cannabis technology. And that was a business that I was going to fund or found until I decided that I had a weird desire to be a stand-up comedian, and I settled on podcaster, right? But I wanted to take my experience in the technology world and as an independent reseller and become a vendor for all of you. But when I started reaching outside of the true cannabis specific softwares, nobody wanted to talk to me because they weren't allowed to touch the space. So for someone like me, seeing comes from the technology world and knows who the golden standards are there, to see a company like Akerna pulling those big behemoths into the space, it makes me very happy. So I've got to ask, because when Nina was on the show, obviously I know her background. Was
Hmm.
she a major part in helping pull that in? Was she just calling up the old Rolodex saying, "All right, guys, it's time to play"?
Well, I was very strategic in terms of leadership of our company and forming some of the right relationships. So, of course, Nina's background as a former SAP executive, it doesn't hurt being able to be taken seriously, having some of those phone calls, and even prior to Nina joining the company, Mark Iwanowski joined our board. Mark is the former CIO of Oracle. So we've really been working on forming these strategic relationships and these channel relationships and ensuring that we're able to offer a value add solution to the industry so that we're providing more value while costing less for these clients than if they were to go directly to one of these large companies and have to rebuild compliance, rebuild reporting in every new market they enter.
That's interesting. So the leadership thing is something that's really cool to me, because you have done a very good job taking prominent technology executives and adding them to your leadership team, right? And obviously that's strategic. But I want to kind of go. Every entrepreneur that's on the show, I ask them the same thing. I always want to hear the nothing to something moment. Where you don't have
Mm.
anything, and then all of a sudden you have a company and you're working on it. Obviously, with you, it was filling a need, right? So I don't really need to ask you that, but all of a sudden you see this need, you start developing the software. I'm sure initially it was for your own companies, and then at some point it had to click, like, hey, this is a business, right? And you started, and it was MJ Freeway, and you started becoming one of the biggest seed to sale tracking companies in the industry. As you go from the initial small company focusing on the company you're invested in to bringing on more clients and growing, how do you handle that as a CEO? Did you have enough experience in your last company, raising capital and managing large budgets and bringing on executives and managing, hundreds of employees? Or did you have to kind of learn that along your journey? Like, where I'm going, and I'll ask these as follow-up questions, is when do you know to bring in that kind of leadership where it's worth the money to have them? Because I'm sure they're not cheap, and we don't need to go into that, but you got to give up something to get them, right? So when do you get to a point where it's, I can't do all this on my own anymore, I need to bring in other experts? And you kind of, and I wrote this down, you know do you go after experience? Do you go after fit? Do you go after passion, right? How do you just go from being this small company to being traded on the Nasdaq and being where you are
Mhm.
today? And I know that's a loaded question, so we just started the beginning ones, and I'll kind of guide you through the rest of it.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. Let's start with your first
It,
question there.
you can. I'm just. I love your story so far over the past 10 years, and I know just because it's cannabis, you're still at the beginning, but it just going from a small operation to a big operation, to me, it's amazing to see people adapt and learn and figure it out, because it just seems so hard.
Well, maybe let's take that first year. MJ Freeway was a side project for me. I had invested in this operation, and my business partner and I gambled on this software, and we did not build it only for the operation in which I had invested. We solicited a customer advisory board to help us build it, and that customer advisory board was our initial set of how we guided our development. Really, that uh, it's a jobs to be done, a client-centric approach in terms of creating solutions for the future. And for me, when it became not a side project anymore, was when we sold a license a day for the first 3 months after we launched. And it was very
cool.
clear. We were the only, we invented seed to sale. We were the only product for a year and a half. And that was when I sold my prior business and committed my time full time to MJ Freeway, and then worked on, okay, how do I fund MJ Freeway? Because my prior business, I had bootstrapped and grown it organically, and that I had not raised capital previously. And in MJ Freeway, we actually had a very hard time raising capital initially, and it's hard to put that in perspective now, but in 2011, cannabis, we would get, I can't tell you how often we would get past term sheet all the way to the point of discussing definitive docs, and then have an attorney or an accountant shut it down and tell this investor, you can't possibly risk your portfolio this way. And so the initial funding for the company actually came from some bridge loans that we took out from friends and family that we signed for personally, and really risked it on this thing that we thought was worthwhile. So in that way, I have a classic entrepreneur risk profile, if you will. And we were able to pay back those loans, become profitable before we took in outside capital, which we did. The first time we took in outside capital was when 3 states all passed adult use in the same year. And we knew that we couldn't meet that type of market expansion growth through our organic revenue means.
Let me stop and ask you a question there, right?
Sure.
And that's interesting because you said you had bootstrapped your first company, right? And so I have a close friend that I hang out with often, and he's one of my more successful friends, and he's a bootstrapper, and that's any company that he starts, that's how he runs it. When with MJ Freeway back then, I imagine looking at 3 markets coming online legal that you're like, man, I would love to attack all 3 of them because I know we can. Did someone have to convince you to go to outside capital, or was that a decision that you came to on your own? Having experience, building a business, bootstrapping it, I'm sure that you kind of had that same, not sure, but I would assume you had that same fire where you're like, no, we can bootstrap this and we can do it. But was there a conversation, or did you have the idea like, hey, maybe we should raise capital because that's the only way we're going to be able to attack 3 markets at once?
It was, the writing was on the wall. we were either going to capture this coming market opportunity or open it up for someone else. And in order to capture that coming market opportunity, we needed additional capital, and traditional bank loan funding was not available to us as a cannabis business. And there was really only one avenue.
Interesting. It's really cool to understand, right? I mean, because it's different from your last business, so you have to make different decisions. And I'm assuming that this particular business is bigger, otherwise you wouldn't have taken the chance on it. So you raise capital, you're expanding into new markets, you're doing well. I don't want to say great yet. Now you're doing great, but you're doing well, and the industry is growing. You're growing. At what point do you start looking and saying, I need to start bringing on other executives to either fill in the gaps of what I don't know or bridge the strategic, connections? Where do you have people obviously who started with you that were loyal, that were passionate, that know the business inside and out. At that point, how do you kind of decide, okay, who am I bringing into a leadership role from inside, and where do I look outside to bring people in? And how do you balance that? Like, I realize I'm basically, I feel like a student in a business class, and you're a guest lecturer, and I'm just trying to learn as much as I can from you. But when you see motivational speakers and leaders and guys like Gary Vee and all those. I love them all, but they're very vague. And I think that's for a purpose, right? So you get the 1,000-foot overview. And I'm really interested in the nitty gritty, the granular, because I'm sure at some point you're like, this is my business, this is my baby. But at some point you've got to let other people play with your toys, I guess, you know? So how do you make that decision to bring them in, and who comes from the outside, who gets lifted up from the inside? Is that I imagine that's a very big challenge for you as a CEO.
That's always tricky to navigate, and I'll say that I received some really important mentorship early on that I think has helped me and Akerna to be really successful in this regard, and that I did not give out C titles until we were going public. So many young software startups have 5, 6, 10 people that all have a different C-level title. And the problem when someone has that title at a 20-person company, and you're now or you're a $1 million company, and now you're a 3, 4, 5, $10 million company, and you need someone who can function at a C level in that size of company. Sometimes those team members can grow into that level, and sometimes they can't. And if you've given somebody the title, you can't take it away and hire someone else in, then you lose them. And so really taking the standpoint of there is no C-suite here except for the owners until we are a company that can command a C-suite. I would say that's the single thing that I did that enabled me to retain some impressive talent from our very early days. And some of those folks have grown into impressive titles, and others have grown in a guru track into other areas of the company, but I didn't have to take a title away from them. I was able to keep them.
Nice. Yeah, this is phenomenal insight into, growing a company as a CEO, right? I'm sure there are a lot of experience. I'm sure, there was a point where you're like, I've had these experiences, and then you get to the point, and as you're growing beyond that, beyond where your last business was, where you really need to, I guess, look to the outside for some advice. Did you have mentors at the time that were guiding you, or have you found new ones in the cannabis space that have helped you out? Just kind of, where do you go? Because, when I listen to Gary Vee, he says it's lonely at the top because when you're the CEO, you have no one to blame for when things go wrong. And obviously you're the end all be all, but at some point, I'm sure you want to look outside for advice and have people that you can, bounce ideas off of, whether you take that advice or not. But, would you say more of your mentors are in this space or outside of it?
So not really in cannabis per se. Of course, we really think of ourselves as a tech company. And the great thing about tech is that there is a phenomenal set of mentors available that are, and generally in tech, the folks who might be mentors are also the people who are innovation focused, who are interested in new ideas. Cannabis is still very sexy and bleeding edge, and so they're more interested to work with a company that's focused on in solving an interesting problem too, if you will. And of course, part of the appeal of our software technology and product is just the transparency and accountability that can be applied to anything you put on or in your body. So we're focused on the cannabis market today, but we have a growing hemp and CBD portion. We certainly have some traditional agriculture customers, and there's a lot of applicability of our software, and being able to find great mentors in tech has been, I don't want to say easy, but I think if you're open to mentorship, that is available.
So you're 100% right. I don't mean to keep pigeonholing you into a cannabis company. I understand that you're a tech company, but as a proud cannabis industry supporter, I want to claim you for our industry until you guys just keep growing beyond it, right? Because
I'll claim cannabis too. I mean, look, that's the reason I invested in that operation originally is I have a family member with a demyelinating illness, and the cannabis's medical benefits for MS were what prompted me to make that initial investment. So I have a real emotional attachment as well.
Yeah, it's that's unfortunate. Sometimes it takes something like that to open people's eyes up to the industry. But you've done wonders for this space, and you are moving beyond it. It's funny. Nina actually stole. She doesn't. She hadn't confirmed this, but she said that one of the first versions of the MJ Freeway software was actually sold to a tomato farm in New Zealand. Is this correct?
That is true. Yes.
So I thought that was interesting because when I see you, give lectures or keynotes or anything else like that, you talk about, I think it was the E. coli outbreak with romaine lettuce. And you're essentially like, cannabis is leading the technology in this space, because if they were using our software, we would have been able to tell them right away where that breakout came from.
Absolutely.
That's cool. So is the tomato farm still using it?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I'd have to check our client base. They very well may be.
Very cool.
I know we do have a handful of traditional agriculture clients, and a couple I can think of here in the States, and I'm not sure about that specific farm.
But I think that's really cool that, as you said, you are a technology company now that was founded in cannabis, but I think it's really cool that out of everything that's going to kind of reignite agriculture in this country and make it better and make it more streamlined, that it was cannabis that did that, right? And it was cannabis that where you started, and it gave you the ability to go to other growers and say, hey, we face these issues in our industry all the time. Um, you should use our software, right? And do you, are you really, have you guys started moving out of the cannabis space into more traditional agriculture yet? Or is it still going from cannabis to CBD hemp to probably pure hemp? Or is there a more of a near plan to tackle tomatoes and lettuce and potatoes and all that other good stuff that our country needs help with?
From a sales and marketing perspective, we're not focused on traditional agriculture today.
Okay.
We're focused on cannabis and hemp CBD. And if a traditional agriculture client finds us to be a good fit for their operations, we are delighted to work with them and really begin to build those proof of concepts for the future. But that's not our focus in the near term.
All right, cool. So you developed MJ Freeway to a point where you came together with MTech and you formed Akerna, right? And that's the parent
Mhm.
company for both softwares. At, that's another decision that
So
I
MTech
imagine is
isn't a software, just to be clear. It was a
okay.
just an empty blank check company that listed just to raise the funds to then acquire a company, which was and then MJ Freeway was the operating company that was acquired to
Okay.
form Akerna. Hmm.
Got got it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got confused because I know that you had a after the Akerna, after it became Akerna, you had the MG Freeway, and then you also had Leaf Data Systems together. So with the two, I just got a little bit confused there. But with
Sure.
MTech and being Akerna now, it's nice because you guys are growing by acquisition as well too, and you're able to look at other companies that are doing things well and saying, hey, this fits into our portfolio. We love what you do. It would complement it well, and we want to bring you under our umbrella. At what point do you have to take a step back and look and say, as we're adding new features or new we'll call it units to the overall portfolio, where do you make the decision? Do we grow this particular area by acquisition, or do we do R&D here, right? Because I notice also with big tech companies, Microsoft, IBM, they all have venture funds now. And they're looking at startups that they're to acquire, which is part of their R&D now. And that seems to be a new strategy, which is really cool, seeing big companies support small ones and then eventually, bring them into the fold. Do you have to make a decision when you're seeing something saying, hey, we can easily develop that in-house, or those guys are doing it great? How do you balance out where to acquire and where to develop in-house?
We have a whole rubric for that that weighs a lot of different factors, including the time, the available targets, the potential valuations. as well as what it would cost if we were to build it ourselves, the time to market. So, and then also we weigh some of those factors as well. Is this our core section of the market that we want to own? Is this part of our core ecosystem? With our core ecosystem being the infrastructure as a service, that compliance bus, Akerna's ERP, or is this traditional functionality? And then we do we buy, acquire, or build traditional functionality based on this analysis.
Very cool. So you guys are very much, you practice what you preach. So your platform gives, a substantial amount of data to the people that you work with, right? I was looking at something on the what is it called, the Akerna Flash Report, but normalize, you get data, which is important, supply chain data, business insights, gross margins, everything down to what SKUs that companies should be carrying on their shelves. So, I mean, it seems that not only are you providing your clients a lot of data, but you're leveraging a lot of data internally to make your own decisions. It seems like that theme, kind of how you guys handle business internally, trickles down to your clients as well.
I think the right way to think about us is as an enterprise software company. And of course, our clients tend to be the more enterprise cannabis clients or folks with a unique brand or boutique offering. And being able to have that mindset to think everything needs to be ROI based. So it all comes down to the data. We run our business on the data. Is this going to add to the top line? Is it going to save from the bottom line? And what is the trade-off if I do X instead of Y instead of Z? And the same for our clients. We want to make sure that that's the value we're providing back to the industry. We announced MJ Analytics in partnership with Domo to be able to provide a higher level of analytics back to the industry. That's being very well received, and really helping our clients. Any good piece of software should provide way more value than it costs. And an example of this would be a client of ours that was a way on the spot deli type operation. We help them run some reports to see that one of their bud tenders is weighing heavy to the tune of 20 grand a year. Wow. So just but a little tiny bit here and there. And in looking into it, it turned out there wasn't theft. There was nothing else involved. It was just this one was being a little bit generous with every single purchase that was made. And we were able to adjust the tolerances in the system so that he couldn't weigh that heavy. And essentially we saved that client more than we cost that year. So that's an example of what good software should do for you through analytics.
That's absolutely incredible. And my follow-up question to that, because just based on what you said, is, and I'm trying to do this carefully here, right? Not everybody knows what to do with that data, right? So you can give somebody the tools, but they may not know how to use them. So as you develop these new analytic tools for this industry, listen, I deal with brands and retailers every day. There are some that are extremely sophisticated and have data analysts and everything else. And then there are the others that are bootstrapping, they're passionate, and they're just working their asses off. Was there a big educational component with your clients to say, here are the data points that you get, but also this is how you're going to leverage them to make decisions? Is there a big educational component with your software as well?
Certainly there's some education. We try to make it really easy. We have a built-in learning management system that we're able to provide short little videos to learn about our software. This is a company, Zoltrain, that we made an investment in, and there we provide our learning management system to our clients, and also our clients could contract directly with Zoltrain to train on their brands or on their products and services as well. So it serves a couple purposes for us in terms of our having invested in that company. And we also offer tiered levels of support where we will spend time and help our clients craft these reports, run these reports on a regular basis, and look at those results. And we certainly contract with our clients for services to do that. And again, that is the kind of thing that we should be able to measure and say, okay, we have we've saved you far more money, or we've added more revenue through the insights that we've been able to help you glean.
So it's funny. I'm really enjoying this conversation just from the IT nerd in me, right? For a short-lived time, I did another podcast called In Your Wheelhouse, and it was in the IT world. And this seems so much more like it would be an episode of In Your Wheelhouse than Elevate Your Grind, because we're talking so much about tech, but it is tech that applies to the cannabis space. And it's what's bringing our industry to maturity and normalizing it to make it seem like any other company, right? And at the end of the day, we all believe that cannabis is probably going to become a commodity that's going to, it's kind of ingrain itself into other industries, and we're going to see it in so many different places. Transitioning again, you are listed on the Nasdaq, right? And obviously, as a technology company, that's exactly where you should be. You don't touch the plants, so you don't have to worry about that. So I was reading an article, and I think it was one of your colleagues was talking about the fact that almost didn't happen, and that without you and without your persistence, it wouldn't have happened. That every call that you had leading up, because it was a cannabis company, not because you weren't a good company, because it was a cannabis company, that it ended on a low note, and you were able to convince them to take just one more call, and then just one more call. And because of your persistence, you were able to get on the Nasdaq. So incredible. That was absolutely incredible. So take me to that. How important to you was that to get on that Nasdaq and get listed? And what was it like having that fight to finally get that? Yes, we're going to list you. It's going to happen, knowing that you're going to get to go and ring the bell and all that good stuff. Just how does that feel as an entrepreneur going 10 years? You're now publicly, I think it was 9 years you guys listed at, you're publicly traded. And that was because of your passion. I imagine the rest of the company had to be extremely fired up to hear that story.
Well, I love Ben Horowitz, and the hard thing about hard things. And I think in there at some point he says that if you ask any successful CEO, the secret to their success, at the end of the day, they'll say some version of, well, I just didn't give up. I just was never willing to quit. I was never willing to give up. And I think our NASDAQ story is related to that, in that we were new, we were different, we were a company that would be then the first of its kind to list. And there was still this question of, okay, in and of ourselves, what we do is not federally illegal, but if you're serving a client base that is federally illegal, which laws then come into play that may or may not apply to you? And without going into any of the secret sauce, that was a long negotiation, and not even necessarily, I wouldn't even say negotiation, but education. It was a long education of working with NASDAQ's legal to, hey, please just let us clarify, please take a look and let us walk you through what we do, walk you through how we've taken the steps to ensure that we believe we're on the right side of federal legality. And we were able to achieve that, and it was not an easy feat, and I'm very proud of that accomplishment.
It's an amazing accomplishment. I commend you for it. And I hope you take, I hope you don't mind taking compliments from a kid sitting in his office with a webcam and a microphone. But you're very inspiring in the way that you handle things, right? You are. I'm not just saying that to kiss up, but it's not just the major CEOs of the world, but anybody who's willing to take a risk on themselves and bet on themselves. And you had a business and you sold it to do this full time. You didn't have to do that. I'm sure you could have stayed where you were and you had the experience and you could have been comfortable, but you saw an industry, you saw a need, you filled it, and you just continued to not take no for an answer. I hope that's inspiring for other people in this industry. And I know it is, and you keep getting recognized for it. So that's why I wanted to have you on the show. And I'm very interested to know, from the early days of MJ Freeway to now being the chairman and CEO of Akerna on a publicly traded company, how has your life changed? Do you still feel like the same person who started MJ Freeway 11 years ago? Do you feel mature? Do you feel that you have an entirely new skill set? I mean, I imagine that you'd have to develop that. Something that scares the crap out of me is being the CEO of a publicly traded company. Not that that's ever going to happen, because you look at Elon Musk being on Joe Rogan's show, taking a hit of a joint, and his stock drops 6 points, right? You don't know what's going to affect your stock price, right?
Sure.
So, do you think that you've really had to mature over the last 11 years to be where you are? At least from a business standpoint. Personal lives, we never really have to mature if we do things right.
I mean, I had a 3-year-old when I started this business, and now I have a teenager. So if that doesn't give you a few gray hairs, I don't know what will.
Oh, wow.
So certainly, I one of my core values is professional growth and creating impact, and not just professional growth, but personal and professional growth. And so I hope to be growing for all of my life, and I hope to be able to evaluate where I can provide back, and create impact as well. So certainly, I don't. When you go through the type of journey that we've gone through as a company, and you're always solving new problems every year and growing and evolving and innovating as well, because the wonderful and exciting thing about cannabis to me is that my job is to solve the problems of tomorrow. My job is to think 12, 18, 24, 36 months out, what steps do I need to take today to ensure that I'm positioned for that? And certainly the transition to being a public company, there's a lot of quarterly pressure and this quarterly cadence. And how do you balance that quarterly pressure and quarterly cadence with what I see as my real job, which is to create long-term value? And that has been a learning experience that I'm so pleased to have had the opportunity to experience, and believe that I'm getting better at every day, every month, every year.
That's awesome to hear. And like, you have a teenager now, which is incredible. I actually have she's going to be a 14 months old. I have a 14-month-old daughter. So I hope 10 years from now I get to sit on this show and say the same thing, that when I started the show I had a toddler, and now I'm coming up on a teenager. But do you have any intention is it a boy or girl? Sorry, I didn't catch
I have a
that one.
daughter.
Does your daughter have any intention of looking at the family business now and coming on board and joining? Does she take interest in mom's work?
That is a great question, and the answer is a resounding no today. But is it still a resounding no when she's 20? I don't know. At 14, she wants nothing to do with anything that is cool to me. So she's also, I will say, she is very much an artist and a creator. She is, though, going to a STEM middle school, and she's currently creating an app. Her current app creation idea is something where you load all of your data into the app, and it allows you to then have all your data for your dog to go to any doggy daycare instead of having to do it at each individual one, which I personally think is a great business idea and brilliant. But then she comes to me and she says, "Mom, so I have this idea, but you're the one who knows how to build an app." And my response back to her is, "I have a day job. I think maybe you need to learn how to build an app." or figure out how to sell a business partner to come build an app with you.
I don't think she knows what your hourly consulting rate is. She can't afford that.
That's right.
Even with the friends and family discount. So that's incredible, though. But I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but when I say that you're inspiring, having a little girl, it's great to see people like you and Emily Paxia and Rosie Matteo and the women that I've met in this industry. And to have people that I can show to my daughter, like, look at them, they're crushing it, they're doing better than so many other people. I'm a new dad, and to have that, to make it easy on me, and the fact that I've spoken to all of you, and I look up to all of you, is really exciting. So that means the world to me, that you all would do the show, and that you're doing what you're doing, and that I get, I'm not this CEO or powerful cannabis person, but I, with this show, get a front seat to watch amazing people do amazing things. And that's why I love doing this, to get the opportunity to be just in the atmosphere that you guys are in. So, we're getting towards the end here. I've taken up a lot of your time, but I saw something that was extremely intriguing about you, because you have a hobby that not many people have that is awesome. I had a friend who did this in college, but you are a rock climber, and that is your hobby. So, as the CEO of a major as a publicly traded company, how do they feel about you being out on the weekends climbing mountains and cliffs and everything else? I imagine the board of directors kind of sits there and says, "Oh, she's going climbing this weekend. Is anyone going to watch her?" That is not something you see a lot of people do. Do you still have a lot of time to go and get out there? Because it's not like that probably takes more time than golf does.
Yes, let's be clear. I on one hand, maybe two, can count the amount of times that I'm able to get outside and climb in a year. The wonderful thing that exists today is this thing called climbing gyms, and I do go to I religiously to the gym a couple times a week, and have other um, uh, physical exercise that I do. I love to ski. The family loves to ski. So we do have that. And climbing, the wonderful thing about climbing is there are so many parallels to business. You are taking the risk. You have to determine what your next moves are. If you get them wrong, you're going to fall. You're going to fall past your last point of protection, to climb back up, reevaluate, try to make a new set of moves and solve the issue. So for me, it is so soul supporting, in that it really helps me to get out of my head. It helps me to access that place that people call the zone or flow, or say, there are all these different words for it, but that place where ultimately innovation is born. I've never met anybody that sat down at their computer and invented the next good idea. It always comes to you when you're doing something else. And for me, climbing is the fastest way for me to access that. And I love the gym almost as much as I love going out. I shouldn't say that. I love being able to go to the gym because it enables me to still have fitness when I have the opportunity to go outside.
Oh, very cool. Well, the climbing gyms are awesome. So if I ever get the opportunity to do that with you, that'd be great. But for the outside stuff, you would have a very large man crying halfway up the mountain and just wanting to get down. So we will never offer that. But Jessica, thank you so much for this conversation. It has been amazing. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. So before we let you go, social media handles, if you have any speaking engagements coming up, I know there's a lot of conferences this month, websites, let's get that all out there.
Sure. So Akerna.com is our main website. My social handles are either Jess Billingsley or Jessica Billingsley, I think, across the board. So you should be able to find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, etc. And I just spoke at the Cowan conference with Vivian on some of our Akerna insights that we have, some of the data that we're able to project from the industry. And I'm not sure if I have anything upcoming in the next week or two, but that one's probably available here to view, I would assume, pretty soon.
Very cool. Well, thank you again. And if for folks, if you're just tuning in, you're catching the end of this interview will be up on our YouTube page next week, youtube.com/elevate your grind. We'll make sure that all of the links to find Jessica are underneath the video. Jessica, again, thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm excited to continue to watch what you do. It's Spring Big. We work with Zoltring closely, so I'm happy to do. I'm excited with that partnership, and definitely want to have you back in the future as you grow, and bring you back to talk about more.
Wonderful. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate it, and happy to continue the conversation another time.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you everybody again at home for watching. We will be live tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, right here, facebook.com/Canna Business Group. Of course, the recordings, as I said before, youtube.com/ElevateYourGrind. And we're also on all the audio platforms where you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. Some podcaster is making Spotify famous. I heard he signed a big deal. We're trying to get there too. So everybody have a good night. This has been another episode of Elevate Your Grind, and we're out.